Join me as I explore one of the great enigmas of archaeology, the Nazca Lines. These mysterious figures of the Peruvian desert have been called the eighth wonder of the world. Who made them, and why? The Nazca Lines still baffle archaeologists. To understand them, I'll be exploring the mysteries of ancient desert engravings from Peru to the southwestern United States. There'll be some wild adventures in the air, on the sea, and even beneath the desert. Once again, we're digging for the truth, and we're going to extremes to do it. This really hits home. These are the deserts of southern Peru. They are some of the driest and most desolate places on the earth. Hi, I'm Josh Bernstein, and I've come here to solve one of archaeology's greatest mysteries, the Nazca Lines of Peru. For centuries, when people crossed these plains, they noticed lines in the sand. But they had no idea what they were seeing. Then, in the 1920s, came the first airplane flights. When pilots looked down from the skies, they were amazed. For the first time, they could see the lines were part of a massive complex of geometric figures called geoglyphs, covering the whole desert. Who made them, and why? The mystery of the Nazca Lines was born. The Nazca Plain is the Death Valley of South America, baking hot and almost totally without rainfall. Sandwiched between the Pacific Ocean and the Andes Mountains, it was home to an enigmatic culture. The ancient Nazca people who lived here between the 4th and 9th centuries left no great cities. They lived along the fertile river valleys crossing the desert. On the plains between the river valleys, they built their monumental designs. The Nazca Lines have become one of the world's most famous archaeological mysteries. I've come here to explore that mystery. This is the modern-day town of Nazca, home to about 30,000 people. As you can see, it's changed a lot over the last 2,000 years. But one thing that hasn't changed is that people still come here to see the lines, which are just a few miles outside of town. The town of Nazca is an interesting mix of open markets, agricultural businesses, and internet cafes. It's a fun town. But to begin my exploration, I decide to skip the stores and get a good look at the lines myself. The best way to see the lines, really the only way, is from the air. And there's no shortage of conventional aircraft available for tours. But I'm looking for something a little bit more unconventional and exciting. Eduardo? Hi. Eduardo Herrén probably knows the Nazca Lines better than anybody else alive. He's been flying over them for 26 years. Is it safe?
Oh, yes, it's safe.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I don't know, I think I weigh more than this.
Oh, yes, but for the Nazca wings it's good. Huh?
It's probably the best way to see the lines.
Oh, yes, for the lines it's the best platform. It's a ULM, it's ultralight.
Okay, my life's in your hands.
Yeah?
Yeah. Eduardo has discovered and mapped 324 lines and figures himself. He's passionate about them. He tells me he spent 12,000 hours in the air above the lines. 12,000 hours above the Nazca Lines?
Yes, in 26 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah, complete.
I say let's go see him.
Go, friend.
All right.
Okay, muchachos, vamos.
This is really
And now
light.
you discover the Nazca Lines, friend, huh?
Eduardo tells me he's had a few crashes in his ultralight, one of which nearly killed him. That's not exactly what I wanted to hear, but I'm not going to let it put me off. You ever have a wing just fall off spontaneously? If he's game, so am I. It feels like a very flimsy aircraft, which I guess it is. But we successfully take off and begin our ascent. As we gain altitude and I can finally see the Pampa or Nazca Desert, I relax and stare in wonder at what's appearing on the ground below. Some people believe the lines were built for extraterrestrials. Seeing them now, I understand why. Many of them do look like runways. And why would an ancient people make figures which can only be seen from the air?
I'm amazed at how spread out they are. And that they're really everywhere. Yeah.
Hundreds of lines crisscross the desert, some 10 miles long. A massive bird is the size of a football field. There's a monkey, a little harder to make out.
Right there. Yeah. The tail. It's great.
The spider is about 200 yards across. What looks like a whale swims across the desert, a plume of water erupting from its blowhole. On the side of a hill, I see a huge figure which looks human. Others are harder to identify. One in particular catches my eye.
What's that one there?
It looks like a flower. Eduardo tells me he has never seen it before.
Oh, look. Congratulations. Did you look number one? I did? Yeah, never. Really?
This is incredible. On my first flight over the lines, I've actually discovered a new Nazca figure.
Yeah.
There are thousands of figures. In fact, Eduardo has found 324 himself. Even so, it's an amazing stroke of luck to find one on my first flight, and to have it captured on film.
I found one.
And I drove many times.
Yeah?
For this side, yes. It's the first time we see the flower.
The flower.
325 figures now, friends.
Yeah.
It's good.
My first time over the Nazca lines, but I found one. Because I said to Eduardo, I was like, what's that? He's like, no way! You found one! Thank you. That was great.
Yeah, new figure for me.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
You remember, I said, hey, what happened? You know, and you said me, hey, look there. I've never seen this figure. And today is the first time, and you have the first photo too. And I need this photo, please.
So this is a real discovery. We're not just kidding.
Yes, no, complete. I have 324 yesterday, but today we're at 25. It's incredible. I mean,
No, thank you.
really.
That was great.
You're welcome.
Even without my discovery of a geoglyph, the lines would have captured my imagination. What do they mean? Why are there so many of them? Time to set off across the desert and search for some answers. There is one name that always comes up in relation to the Nazca lines: Maria Reike. This amazing German woman dedicated most of her long life to understanding the lines. For 60 years, until her death in 1998, she studied the Nazca Plains, walking over almost every part of them, often sleeping out at night, obsessed by the mystery of the lines. She was sure she had the answer. To find out about her theory, I'm going in search of Maria Reike's foremost disciple, Anna Maria Cogorno. Anna Maria worked with the famous German archaeologist in the last years of her life.
Anna Maria?
I'm hoping she can shed some light on Maria Reike's much-debated theory.
Great. I just flew over the
Yeah.
Nazca lines, and I was waiting to get down here on the ground. Are these lines?
Yeah, come and see.
The first thing I notice is how hard
Yeah,
it is
come
to see
here.
the lines from the ground.
They look so much bigger in the sky. Wait, this is a Nazca line?
Well,
looks so
this is
small.
the
From
edge
air,
of
they look
it.
like they were.
Yeah,
So
they
much
look
bigger.
like, yeah, but this is only the edge of it.
So you're saying this is an edge?
These are edges, these ones.
So wait a minute, Anna Maria. These are the Nazca lines.
Yes.
Oh, okay, well, I got it. Okay, so now I'm looking at this, thinking this is a Nazca line. Wait, scoot a little bit this way.
Right, but if you come to the middle,
This is the Nazca line.
yes.
Okay. That's
Straight.
huge. Now, see, this I could see from the
Right.
sky.
You can see straight ahead.
Yeah,
You know
this
how
big
it crosses.
path.
Right.
Okay. So how are these made?
Well, the only thing they had to do is just to push the pebbles and the stones to the side to make the designs, the patterns, you know, just moving the pebbles and the stones.
I always thought that they brought the rocks here and that they had to build these shapes, but they didn't. They sort of cleared the lines.
Very simple but very logical way how to do it, no?
So this whole field was covered with these dark rocks.
Absolutely. Because there was this huge flood millions of years ago. So the yellowish clay is underneath, and it was covered totally with volcanic stones containing iron and the little pebbles. They came through big floods, no?
So these are volcanic.
Yeah.
And then they used to lay on the surface over this lighter stuff.
You're right.
And then 2,000 years ago, they
Yeah.
pushed them into these patterns.
The ancient Nazca must have had an advanced knowledge of survey techniques. With primitive transits and marker ropes, they could lay out complex designs across the desert. Then they just had to move the top layer of stone to reveal the pattern. It's a clever and simple way to transform the landscape. Archaeologists have calculated that a small group of people could have made one of the large figures in fewer than 48 hours. The other thing that amazes me is how the lines have lasted for so long. It turns out that there are two good reasons for that. The sand here has a high level of gypsum in it, which gets dampened every night by dew, gluing the stones to the ground. Also, the stones absorb so much heat in the day, they create a cushion of warm air above them, protecting them from the wind. As a result, any mark made on the desert stays for centuries. Car tracks made in the 1920s are still there today. So I understand how they made the lines. Now I want to know why they made them. Anna Maria tells me this is a good place to discuss Maria Reiche's theory.
Yeah.
That's great.
Now I can see the trapezoid. So what does this mean?
Well, the purpose of all the lines, figures, were related to positions of the moon, the sun, the stars, solstice lines also.
So on the 21st of December, which is your summer
It's our
solstice,
solstice.
my winter solstice,
Right,
This line points to the place on the horizon where the sun rises.
right. So, for example, the lines points out the horizons, and also the figures are the constellations.
It's a fascinating idea. Maria Reiche believed the ancient Nazca built the lines to be a huge star chart, a map of the skies. The figures were constellations. The lines, pointing to the rising and setting of stars, allowed them to mark the seasons. If it's true, it would make the people of Nazca some of the greatest astronomers of the ancient world. But it turns out the astronomy theory leaves a lot unexplained.
What Anna Maria said is really interesting. There's just one problem, and that astronomical alignment can only account for 30% of the Nazca lines.
And if you draw any line on the desert, it's going to stand about a 30% chance of pointing at something on the horizon. The constellation idea is just as random. If you look at the night sky, you can make out just about any shape or figure you want. All in all, the astronomy theory by itself does not seem to get us very far. I'm on the trail of one of archaeology's greatest mysteries, the famous Nazca lines of Peru. I've already discovered a new Nazca figure myself, to the amazement of veteran pilot Eduardo Harang.
No way! You found one! Thank you. That was great.
I've also found out about the oldest theory of the lines,
Okay.
that they were a great astronomical observatory. But it turns out that theory is largely discredited. There's got to be another explanation. To get any further, I need to get closer to the Nazca people, who disappeared over 1,000 years ago. I've seen the lines they drew and the amazing environment they lived in, but I haven't got a sense of the people themselves. I'm told the place to do that is at the desert cemetery called Chauchilla. Deborah McLaughlin, who's come with me, is a Nazca specialist.
What are these?
This is one of the 13 tombs that you find here, and this has quite a few mummies in there.
So these are Nazca bones?
Yes, from the late Nazca period. And the cemetery, in fact, was used for a much longer period of time. It really was used up to the Wadi period, which is the culture that came after the Nazcas.
So between the 7th and 9th centuries?
Yes.
So this is pre-Inca?
Pre-Inca. Yes.
Late Nazca?
Correct, yes.
To protect them, some of the skeletons have been gathered together in pits by archaeologists. Ancient Peruvians usually buried their dead in a sitting position. For years after they died, they would receive the offerings of the living. As centuries passed, they might be forgotten. But the desert is so dry, the mummies survived in almost their original state.
They seem to be not, most of them are not artificial mummification, but they are rather a natural process. They only got the guts out of them. And then because of the dry conditions and the heat, they mummified naturally.
Beyond the burial pits is one of the strangest sights I've ever seen. The desert is littered with fragments of human skeletons.
So these bones, these are human bones, and they're
Yes.
just lying here.
Part of a skull, and then
Wow, that's a bit spooky, huh?
Yep.
This whole place is just...
There are quite a few large bones around and skulls you see all around there. The whole area, you see all around, there's pieces of skulls, large bones. There are even some remains of cotton. And that here, just there.
Here.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Some of the skulls.
These are, okay, I'm gonna
That's
just leave that
cotton.
there then. So this is cloth
Yes.
that the mummies that we just saw are interred in. There's a person underneath here.
Yeah.
There's probably people all over this place.
Yes, it's a very large cemetery.
And it's just through the erosion of time that we're seeing the bones on the surface.
Yep.
Wow. Cool. That's freaky.
I wanted to come close to the Nazca, but I never imagined I would get this close.
This is a very surreal and, just a visceral reminder of these people. This isn't just about lines and the artwork. These were people who lived here, and these are their bones to prove it. And for me, this really hits home.
The Nazca burial ground is amazing. It also really impresses on me just how arid this desert is. That's why it struck me as strange that the lines included so many ocean animals. A whale, a fish, a frigate bird. I wonder if the sea might hold some clues to the mystery of the lines. When I get to the ocean, I discover one of the most dramatic coastlines I've ever seen. The seas of this remote coast are some of the richest in the world. I've heard that local fishermen still use techniques similar to those of the ancient Nazca.
Deborah? I found you!
Deborah is waiting for me at the beach.
This is great. What are these guys doing?
This traditional way of fishing, which, as I was telling you, I mean, they do it in a very, very similar way to what people did in ancient times. They have these floaters there.
The inner tube.
Exactly, they're made with an inner tube. Before, in ancient times, people used inflated sea lion skins.
Really?
Yes, so it's very similar to those you see the inner tubes, but they were the skins at the time. But basically, they used nets. They were the same amount of people, used the same areas.
So the materials have changed, but the technique hasn't.
Exactly.
But one reason why I'm here and why I was interested to see the seafaring activity is because I flew over the geoglyphs.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of marine life pictures.
Yes, definitely.
Like whales.
Yep.
And I don't get it. Why would the people who dwell in the desert have these images of sea life?
Well, obviously because they were living in both places.
Yeah.
No, they were complementing agricultural activities with fishing activities. No.
So they split their time between the land and the sea.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Imagine this scene with an inflated sea lion skin, plant fiber nets, gourd floaters, and rock weights. And there would have been not one crew of fishermen on this beach, but many. Now's my chance to find out about Nazca fishing techniques. Firsthand.
Wait, you know what? Here, wait, hold this.
What are you doing?
I'm gonna go join them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just one of my stuff. I'll see you at the other end.
The water is cold, and the surf is really strong. To do this on a daily basis, those Nazca fishermen must have been tough and determined. We push the tube with the net piled on top of it around in an arc. When we've completed the arc and brought the far end of the net ashore, we haul in both ends of the net.
Well, at first, the water was ice cold. But then after you're swimming so hard against the current, it's exhausting. So I don't feel the cold anymore. I think they were kind of confused because they didn't really know why I was running into the water with them. And I don't know, there's supposed to be a game plan, like who goes where. I think they just forgot everything and went, oh my God, this guy's in the water with us. And why is he wearing his clothes? So now we just gotta pull it in and see if we caught anything.
As we pull in the net, I wonder if it was from experiences like this that the Nazca drew their figures on the desert. This coastline is still populated by the sea creatures of the lines. Could it be they simply drew the animals they saw around them? But in that case, why a monkey? The nearest monkeys are on the other side of the Andes Mountains, in the Amazon jungle. There are no easy answers here, but there is another theory involving water. Not the sea, but water to irrigate their fields. In this desert, it's got to be the most precious commodity. Who made the famous Nazca lines of Peru? And why? The deeper I dig, the more puzzling the mystery becomes. I've already investigated the first theory of the lines, that they were an astronomical chart. It turns out to be a partial explanation at best. Only 30% of the lines have been shown to mark solstice points or have any astronomical correlation. So I've been following a hunch that the lines might have a much more practical explanation. Something to do with water. The Nazca lived in one of the driest places in the world. Their greatest concern must have been water. When I ask Nazca specialist Ana Maria Cogorno about this, she tells me that there's a theory which relates the lines directly to water. It turns out that beneath the desert are a number of aquifers, or underground water flows. The water theory says that the lines point not to the stars, but to these subterranean water sources. Ana Maria says she's got something to show me. Aqueducts. She tells me that Nazca built aqueducts which tapped into those aquifers. This is something I've got to explore.
So they made these. These are 2,000 years old.
It's unbelievable. They still use them.
What are these guys doing now?
Now they're cleaning. They're taking all the seaweeds out of it so that the water can flow.
Where does this water come from?
Comes from the water table.
So this is groundwater.
Yeah, groundwater.
And without this water, they couldn't live here.
Absolutely. The first thing was to observe the water and control the water system.
I want to see exactly how the Nazca tapped this aqueduct system into the aquifer.
So, I think I'm now going to flush myself down the Nazca line.
Let's see where it goes. Inside, it's cramped, smelly, and wet. which is what you'd expect of a 2,000-year-old aqueduct. What you wouldn't expect is how beautifully preserved it is.
This is incredible. Can you imagine that this was made 2,000 years ago? Look at this. It's like this perfect little channel running underneath the desert above. That is incredible.
And then I find out why it's so well preserved. Way inside the aqueduct, I meet a man cutting the mosses and grass, which have grown here since the last cleaning. He's getting the aqueduct ready for the rains, which will fill it in a few weeks' time. It's an incredible thought that these aqueducts have been maintained like this for almost 2 millennia. Every 50 yards or so, there's a spiral entrance to the system, which makes it easy for people to get to the water. From the air, these entrances look amazing, like huge screw holes in the desert. This remarkable water system still irrigates large areas of the desert today. Water is a precious commodity in this parched landscape. The few rivers generate oases of green vegetation, but for much of the year are dry. The aquifers, filled with water from the mountains, never dry up. According to the water theory, the lines marked these underground water sources. Aqueducts were one way the Nazca could tap into them. "40 yards up the aqueduct, and it's starting to get narrower. I wonder what I'm going to find at the end. How does it connect to the aquifer? Does water just seep in, or is it somehow channeled into this tunnel?"
Well, let me see if I can give you a sense of what this feels like. Aside from the cramped position, it's cool, and it smells like mud. Not stagnant mud, maybe because they're cleaning them now, but definitely there's a loamy smell. Something's been here for a while.
I push on, but the going gets harder.
Okay, it's getting narrower.
Before long, I can tell there's no way I'm going to make it all the way up to the aquifer.
It's a lot smaller than I was expecting. This is the tight part. This is the tight part. So close!
As the aqueduct gets smaller and smaller, I have no choice but to go up at the next exit.
Not far, not much farther.
I guess the ancient Nazca were smaller than I am.
And I gotta say, I am amazed. I had no idea that aqueducts existed in South America, and certainly not 2,000 years ago. The technology, just the ability for these people to engineer such an incredible channel of water and protect it. I have tremendous new respect for the Nazca. I'm definitely impressed. And I definitely need a shower.
So could the Nazca lines be pointing to subterranean sources of water? I discovered that geologists have plotted the lines against the underground geological faults and aquifers of Nazca.
It's true that a lot of the lines point to sources of water, either in the mountains or under the ground. But, like the star theory, there's a problem. Only 30% of the lines correlate to water.
And as we all know, the 30% correlation is close to meaningless. I'm no closer to a convincing theory about the meaning of the lines. It's time to widen my investigation. The problem with Nazca is that all the theories are pure conjecture. We know how they made them, but we don't know why. But there are other great geoglyphs in the Americas about which we know a lot more. I've been exploring the deserts and coasts of southern Peru, searching for clues to the meaning of the mysterious Nazca lines. The two great theories about these massive desert geoglyphs, that they're an astronomical chart or a map of underground aquifers, have both turned out to be unconvincing. The lines are still a mystery. So I've decided to widen the investigation and explore other geoglyphs which might shed some light on the Nazca lines. So I'm heading to Southern California, where ancient North Americans living along the Colorado River also made geoglyphs. They've been given the Italian name intaglios, engravings. I'm hoping that the geoglyphs here in the lower Mojave Desert can give me some insights into the meaning of the Nazca lines. And once again, the best way to see these things is from the air. Joe?
Yeah, Joe Shebley.
Hey, Josh.
Nice to meet you.
Great to meet you.
Understand you want to go see the intaglio.
I do.
Well, I know where they're at.
The flight takes us from the irrigated flatlands around the small town of Blythe towards a low range of mountains in the distance. The intaglios are in the foothills on the far side. As we fly over the mountains, I'm struck by how similar the parched, barren landscape of the Mojave is to the Nazca Plains. Finally, I see the intaglios beneath us. They're much smaller than the Nazca lines, and sometimes hard to make out. The first one I see seems to be a human figure, gesturing. Others are not far away. There's another human figure. Close to it is an animal, though which one it's hard to say. They're really intriguing. I knew about the Nazca lines. I had no idea that we had geoglyphs here in North America. But again, why? Why did people go to such lengths to put these forms in the middle of a very dry, hostile environment? What do they mean? I can't wait to get down on the ground and investigate them further. What really distinguishes the intaglios from the Nazca lines is that the direct descendants of the people who made them still live in these lands. So the first person I want to talk to is Lori Kachora, an archaeologist and an elder of the Quetzan people.
Lori, as a member of the Quetzan Nation, what can you and your people tell me about the intaglios?
They use them for religious practice. There are two different types. There is one that's the good being, and then there's one that's the bad. So when you look at it, we're talking about the negative and positive world, negative and positive way of our life.
So cosmic forces are being dealt with around these geoglyphs?
Yes.
But practically speaking, then, how would people actually use these as part of their ceremonies?
Oh yes, people use them in many different ways, just seeking for knowledge, wisdom, whatever one is searching for.
What Lori tells me about the intaglios is a real revelation. Their meaning has nothing to do with astronomy or water, and everything to do with religion. They are figures from the great creation myths of his people. He says that they were also the sites for vision quests and important ceremonies. Could this have been the purpose behind the Nazca lines too? It might explain why the people of Nazca spent so much time and energy creating them. Perhaps, like the intaglios, the figures were the gods of Nazca creation. Could it be the Nazca were turning the desert into a sacred landscape, a great ritual arena where they could perform their ceremonies? The person who might be able to tell me more is one of the world's leading authorities on geoglyphs, David Whitley. David, what can the geoglyphs here at Blythe tell me about the geoglyphs at Nazca?
Well, what's important about these is that we have historical and contemporary Native American accounts for why these were made and how they were used ceremonially. That may not be exactly the same as the reasons why the Nazca lines were created and how they were used, but it begins to give us an idea of how traditional people why they made and how they used these sorts of features, and that's a good place to start an archaeological investigation.
The intaglios are fragile. Like the Nazca lines, they're as easy to erase as they were to make. Fencing them in may not be beautiful, but it makes very good sense.
It looks like they make these the same way. They push away the volcanic crust to reveal the lighter sand below.
This desert pavement, yes, just scraped away.
So what does this mean?
Well, this happens to be Mastamho, the creator deity. And this is the location of a mythic event, a place where he did something important in the creation story. Here, the rivers of the Colorado River waters were rising, and he stopped the area from flooding by raising and lowering his arms 4 times. That caused the water to recede, and it saved the people.
And they've captured that story here on the ground.
Correct.
And then there are others? I think there's one more down there.
Yes, there are others that are related to this particular mythic event.
How is it then that they would use a glyph like this for a ceremony?
What they would do on a ritual pilgrimage would be to come to this location and, for example, use a spot like that and have a ritual dance, a ceremony at a location here where an important event occurred.
So this little patch of sand here was
Cleared area.
cleared away. And then they would perform a ritual here.
A dance, potentially,
That
here.
relates to the geoglyph there.
It would commemorate this particular mythic event.
Lori and David have opened up a whole new dimension to my understanding of these great desert geoglyphs. Here on the Mojave, they were clearly ceremonial sites. Now I need to find out if the Nazca lines were too. My search for the meaning of the Nazca lines has taken me from Peru to Southern California. Why did ancient Americans draw giant lines and figures in the desert? Theories that they were astronomical charts or maps of underground water have turned out to be pure conjecture. But in California, I discovered a very different theory about America's mysterious geoglyphs. They were the sites for great ceremonies, sacred places where the gods of creation were celebrated. Could this be the purpose of the Nazca lines too? I realize I know almost nothing about Nazca rituals. Time to head back to Peru and follow this new line of inquiry. When I get to Lima, the first place I visit is the Archaeology Museum. Elsa Tomasto is a curator of the greatest Nazca collection in the world.
These are the spiders.
Yes.
It's just like the geoglyph.
Yes.
What I'm looking for is evidence of Nazca rituals. It's not long before Elsa shows me some. It really takes me by surprise.
Yes. These are ceremonial urns.
What are these figures?
You can see trophy heads.
Trophy heads.
Yes. You can see here and here. You can see the hand with the head, and the neck is cut.
Yeah. That's a trophy head.
Yeah.
The mystery of the Nazca deepens. Who were they? I've been asking questions about them as astronomers, engineers, and farmers. Suddenly, I discovered they were headhunters too. I knew that the Inca, who dominated this area 500 years after the Nazca, decapitated their enemies and took their heads as trophies, even using them as drinking vessels. Now I discovered the Nazca did something similar. In another room of the museum, Elsa shows me the gruesome evidence.
So this is a trophy mummy.
Yes.
What was the use of them?
Probably ceremonial. They call it trophy heads, but we are not sure that it was a war around it.
Wow. Can I hold it?
Yes, but
Yeah?
very, very carefully,
Okay, very
please.
Wow. It's just, you know, I've seen mummies, but I've never just seen the head.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. Without a body, all you have is a head. It feels as weird as it looks. It's really weird. This one has an unusual skull. Isn't that strange?
Yes.
It's sort of squished.
Yes.
Why?
It's a deformation. They use when they were babies. They use the deformator.
They would?
Yeah.
Okay, so they would deform themselves voluntarily.
Yes. You can
Okay,
see
yeah.
here another thing. They took the skin out
Yeah.
and clean the muscles and take out all the soft tissue to be sure that it will dry, and then take again the skin and put it again.
Yeah.
And then they used to hang it.
They would hang it by its own hair.
Yeah. Sometimes it's hair, sometimes it's cotton. It's not always the same thing.
And so this ritual served what purpose? You don't know.
Perhaps to get something from the gods.
From gods, these were offerings.
Elsa tells me that most of the trophy heads are Nazca people. So perhaps they're evidence not of conquest and warfare, but ceremonial violence, some sort of human sacrifice. Is this what happened on the lines? As I walk past the thousands of skulls of long-dead Nazca, I wonder about the scenes they've witnessed. I need to get back to Nazca and ask some more questions. I've heard news of an excavation which is unearthing more signs of ceremonial life. Kawachi is a site on the edge of the Pampa, just a mile or two from where the lines are drawn. Ruben Garcia is the archaeologist who's regional supervisor for the Nazca area.
Well, Kawachi is the ceremonial center, the main ceremonial center of the Nazca nation. That it was a pilgrimage center where people from all the Nazca nation came, gave offerings and special feasts, sacrifices.
So Kawachi was like the Mecca or Jerusalem of the Nazca culture?
It was.
Located by a water source on the edge of the desert, Kawachi was huge. It was the greatest Nazca pilgrimage center. 40 pyramids still lie unexcavated beneath the sand. It's also the place to which many of the lines out in the desert lead. Evidence from Kawachi and from comparisons with the ways living Andean peoples perform their rituals have convinced most archaeologists about the ritual significance of the lines and figures. Many are related to fertility. Ruben has organized a demonstration for me of one of the most common Nazca symbols.
The spirals, they are related to the conch shell, which is used traditionally to call the mountain gods and the clouds for rain.
Finally, the pieces of the puzzle are falling into place. Most archaeologists now believe the lines were sacred pathways on which the Nazca performed their great ceremonies. The figures represented creator spirits, the gods controlling the forces of nature. The Nazca turned their desert into a vast altar to the gods of creation.
And everybody thinks now that most of the lines were made to be walked upon in special ceremonies, rituals, and dancing, maybe singing, playing musical instruments as a way of calling the gods.
The Nazca made their geoglyphs so big because they wanted the gods to look down on them and see they were remembered. When the Nazca danced on the lines and figures, they were making an offering to those mythic beings on which every aspect of their lives depended. Did those offerings include human sacrifice? Ruben tells me there's no evidence of violent rituals on the lines. But he knows there's still a lot about the Nazca to be discovered. Who knows what theories about the mysterious lines of Nazca will emerge in the future?